Hey, Matt Alt here, and we have an exciting episode today because Japan has a new prime minister, Shigeru Ishiba. Shigeru Ishiba became Japan's prime minister on October 1st, 2024, and he's a little bit different than the others that we've seen in office to date. And I want to take this time to kind of explore a little bit about why that is. Not so much from a political standpoint. I'm not a political scientist. If you want the quote-unquote grown-up analysis of what Ishiba's rise as prime minister means, I highly recommend following more authoritative, politically oriented podcasters such as Jeffrey Hall, who I will link to in the description below. He does some really great explainers about what's going on in Japanese politics. I want to talk about Ishiba as regards his impact on Japanese pop culture. You may have seen pictures of him dressed like Majin Buu doing cosplay from Dragon Ball Z. He actually has a lot of what you might call otaku credentials. He is a lifelong, avid builder of model kits of military vehicles like planes and ships and all sorts of things, to the point where when he was the defense minister in the aughts, he worked with the JSDF, the Japan Self-Defense Forces, to allow them to display their tanks and vehicles and things at the Shizuoka Hobby Show, which is one of Japan's biggest hobby events. And it just goes to show you, he knew what these model builders wanted. They wanted to see the real versions of the kits they were building. He is a self-avowed fan of the Candies, a 1973 Japanese idol group, and his office is apparently filled with little figurines of them, not to mention the tanks and ships and things that he builds. He is a if not friend, an acquaintance of Mamoru Oshii, the anime director, who did Pot Laborer and Urusei Yatsura, Beautiful Dreamer, and most famously, perhaps, Ghost in the Shell. And Ishiba is said to be called by other people in his party a left-leaning military otaku, which I guess kind of puts him in good company with Mamoru Oshii, who you could say the same thing about. Ishiba is a member of the Liberal Democratic Party, which has been in power in Japan since 1955, with only a couple little breaks in between when rival parties took power. The Liberal Democratic Party is a party that many critics feel is neither liberal nor democratic, nor by some accounts even a party, given that they've been in power for so many decades. And they've also been beset by a lot, and I mean a lot, of corruption scandals. This isn't like my opinion. It's in the headlines. It's been in the headlines for many, many years. And as for the reasons why Japan keeps electing the LDP into power, if people are so upset with it, well, that's something you should definitely turn to people like Jeffrey Hall and other Tobias Harris. He has a great Substack, who do more nuanced political analysis. I want to talk about what does Shigeru Ishiba's ascent to Prime Minister of Japan mean from a pop cultural perspective. Well, there's a couple of problems that are facing the Japanese pop cultural content industry right now. One of them is a really broad thing. Others are more pinpoint. And then there's the question of whether the prime minister can do anything about these things. So let's tackle them one by one. The first is that Japan is a hyper-aging society. This is nothing new. It's been known. Japan has been one of the oldest societies, and I don't mean in the duration of its society, I mean the average age of its citizens, for a very long time. It hit that tipping point way back in the 90s, and now other advanced nations, post-industrial nations, are facing the same problem, but Japan has been facing it for a lot longer. Why is this a problem for pop culture? Well, manga and anime are basically youth cultures. So how long can a country where soon elderly people are going to be outnumbering young people by a large margin, going to keep innovating and having the dynamic energy to keep making one of the most popular youth cultures on the planet? And it really is. Like, anime is said to be bigger than the NFL among Gen Z in America, and America's far from the only country that's in love with anime. Like South America, Europe, Central America, Asia, people love Japanese pop culture. But again, most of that is youth-oriented culture, even if it's not being made by people who are that young anymore. So what can a leader of Japan do to help Japan stay young? Well, what they could do is enact policies that make it more interesting. That's not the word I'm looking for. That make it more possible, I guess, for citizens to want to get married and have babies. The marriage rate and the birth rate have been in decline in Japan for a very long time now. Some of this is due to structural sexism. Some of it's due to the fact that it seems like people, modern generations, just don't want as many kids as previous generations do. But the LDP has not done a lot to reach out, particularly to women. It is seen as a party that's often quite hostile to women, and it's very much, birth rates and marriage rates are very much a societal question. How do you make a society where people want to get married? How do you make a society where people want to have children? The LDP so far has not come up with any answer to that, and Ishiba himself has not come up with any answer to that I'm aware of, and I was kind of looking through his statements on this. So, big question mark. There are other problems that are more in the near future when it comes to the Japanese pop culture industry. One of them is that it is very difficult to make a living in the anime and manga industry. Particularly in anime, salaries are very low, working hours are very high. And you might say, well, what is that? Shouldn't that be self-regulating? Why should it be the government's job to care about this? Well, one reason why is because the Japanese government is using anime in particular as a cornerstone of its so-called Cool Japan initiative, which is a form of cultural diplomacy and soft power. And Japan, the Japanese government, in the Cool Japan program, has been using things like anime and manga, foods, music, all sorts of culture as outreach to kind of promote Japan's image abroad. If you're going to do that kind of thing, it makes sense that you would also try to help fix some of the inherent problems in the industries that are producing this content that the government is using to promote itself. So far, we have not seen any concrete way in which Ishiba has proposed doing this. It hasn't really been on his radar. He's mainly known for his defense work. So big question mark there too. A third thing is very up to the moment, and that is the question of AI. AI is affecting creative industries all over the world. Japan is no exception. The LDP, the Liberal Democratic Party, of which Ishiba is now the head, and as prime minister, the head of all of Japan, the LDP has said that they're gung-ho for AI. They want to make Japan the most friendly country in the world for AI. I've talked about this before as well, but it's fundamentally at odds with their also stated ambition of making Japan a content superpower, which is to say a country that's known for all of the manga and anime and things and movies and music and stuff they make. You can probably see what the problem is here. All of that stuff is made by people. AI is fed on stuff by people and then churns out simulacrums of it for free. So it is in many ways opposed to this desire to become a superpower of content made by people. The LDP realized this pretty soon after they made the declaration that they were going to be the most friendly country to AI in the world, the least regulated country. And now there are, to their credit, discussions going on about how that is going to work in reality. Like if you make Japan an AI-friendly place, how can you also make it a friendly place for artists too who feel like their work is being stolen from them? Still an open question, though. We don't know how this is going to play out. And I looked through Ishiba's comments. I looked through any kind of mention of him in AI. Didn't really see much of anything. So we don't know how he is going to, what policies he might enact, or even what his fundamental stance is about this. So that's a third big question mark there. Which leads us to another thing, which is, people are calling him an otaku. Is he really an otaku? I mean, we've seen him dressed like Majin Buu, but it seems like that was pushed on him. It was at a opening ceremony for a action figure museum. So it wasn't like his hobby or anything like that. He does have these, nerdy hobbies of things like building model kits. He's also a big blogger and he's written a lot about Godzilla. He's written really extensive essays about how he thinks if Godzilla really appeared, how the JSDF would, the Japan Self-Defense Forces would really deal with them, or if they would deal with Godzilla at all. It's kind of amazing. I can't think of any example of this in like America, for instance, where the Secretary of Defense is like, well, what would happen if the Transformers attacked? Which is basically what is happening in Ishiba's blog. I think it's kind of cool. I blog about Godzilla too. But the question is he an otaku, or is he just kind of the face of the times? Many, many years ago, like when Ishiba was a kid, like back in the 60s and 70s, the authorities hated manga and anime. And video games later, they saw them as vices that were corrupting the kids, that were antisocial and a bad influence on society. That hasn't been the case for a really long time now. Around the turn of the millennium, politicians started to realize, well, if Japan is a post-industrial nation, we're going to have to start focusing on content, and that's about the time when the Cool Japan initiative started to come out. So the government hasn't been hostile to anime or manga for a very long time. And the fact is, most people in Japan and the world over in advanced societies have kind of nerdy hobbies. Whether it's building models or building Lego kits, whether it's listening to pop music way after the ages when you're quote-unquote supposed to be listening to pop music. All sorts of things like this. So actually, I don't think these pictures of Japan's prime minister cosplaying they might seem a little funny now because it seems a little unusual. I think we're only going to be seeing more of this in the future as time goes on, and as more people who were raised on anime and manga from birth age and rise into positions of power. So it's going to be really interesting to watch and see how Ishiba affects the pop cultural conversation. I am definitely going to be keeping an eye on this. If you're interested, please keep tuning in. Please hit that subscribe button. And thank you so much for watching. Catch you next time.